Okay, class, in this lesson, you are going to learn about stock market data charts, and specifically, we will walk you through how to interpret and create a stock bar chart as well as a stock candlestick chart. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So how can stock data be displayed? So one of the common ways of displaying stock data is what is called the stock bar chart. Now, if you take a look at the stock bar chart below, there are actually two parts to this, okay? The first part represents the value of a stock throughout a trading day. So the top part of this rectangular bar graph shows the highest value that it traded during the trading day, and then the lowest value that it traded during the trading day. And then this line here represents the price of that stock when the market opened, and then this line here to the right represents the price of that stock when the market closed. Now, the lower part of this chart represents the number of shares traded. Now, one of the things that you need to be careful of is that even though this is a scale from 0 to 40, you need to understand that this could be in millions, or represents millions or thousands or hundreds. So you need to be careful of the labeling here so you really understand how much volume was actually being traded for that day. Okay, now a second way, the second most common way to interpret stock market data is what's called the candlestick chart, okay? And with the candlestick chart, you have a bunch of representations here. So just at a high level, you notice that 3 of these are green and 2 of these are red. So when it is green, it means that the share of that stock closed at a higher value than when it opened. Okay, so that's a good thing. You want the value to go up. However, if it is red, that means that the share of that stock closed lower in price than it did when it opened. So we want to avoid reds, obviously, okay? And then the stems here, going all the way to the top as well as to the bottom, represents the highest amount or value that it traded during the trading day, or the lowest amount that that stock traded during the trading day. Okay, so let's take a look at this first example. We have a stock bar chart that presents trading information for the week of April 28th for a company called Gold Point Manufacturing Company. And the question here is, which day had the highest price, which day had the lowest price, and approximately how many shares of Gold Point Manufacturing Company stocks were traded over the 5-day period. Okay, so for the first two questions, which had the highest price, we're going to look at this top part, okay? And you're going to compare these 5 days of trading, and you'll see that the day had the highest price was on May 2nd. Okay, here's the dates here. So May 2nd had the highest. So I would say May 2, highest price. And then if you take a look at the lowest price, you'll see that April 29th had the lowest price. So April 29th had the lowest price, had the lowest trading price. And then the last question, approximately how many shares of Gold Point Manufacturing Company were traded over the 5-day period. So what we're going to do is to do an approximation. If you take a look at this chart for April 28th, it traded between 150 to 200. It's a little bit above this chart here is a little bit above the midpoint. So let's just say that it is 185 million. And then taking a look at April 29th, This is between midway, looks like midway between 50 to 100, so we're going to say it's 75. And looking at April 30th, looks like it's a little bit higher than the previous day, so we'll go ahead and say that that's 80 million. And then May 1st, this was between 50 and 100. So it looks similar to April 29th, so we'll say 75 million. And then the last day, May 2nd, was close to, we would say 90 million shares. All right, and if we were to add all of those together, we would get 505 million shares were traded during that week. Okay, all right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next example. So example 2 asks us to use the information listed below to construct a one-day stock bar chart for Brown Armor Corporation. Okay, so we have the following information. The stock open, or the share price opened at $40.10 and closed at $39.79. It had a high of $40.65 and a low of $39.39. And the volume was 44.5 million shares. So let's go ahead and create that. So first, let's start with this. All right, so we had a low of 39. So we'll go ahead and start with, let's say that this is 38 and a high of 40. So we'll say this is 39. We're going to need to move this down and extend this. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is 40. Okay, and this is for a one-day stock bar chart. So our opening was 40.10. So we can go ahead and say that it started right about here and it closed at 39.79. So let's say that it's right about here. Okay, and now I should probably move this high over. So that we can make room for the rectangle. And our high was 40.65. So that's right about, let's see, 25, 50, 65. Let's say it's right about there. And our low was 39.39. So that should be about here. All right, so we can go ahead and close this off. Okay, so that's our part of our stock bar chart, and then we have to create another one that represents the volume. So let's go ahead and do that. The volume is 44.5 million. So we could say that, let's say that this is 44. And this is 45, and this is in millions. All right, so 44.5 million would put us about right there. Okay, so that would represent 44.5 million. All right, hopefully that made sense. Let's go ahead and move on to our last example. Here we are asked to explain the difference between the market action on September 8th compared to September 9th shown in the candlestick chart below. So let's take a look. What is the difference between September 8th, which is this right here, and September 9th? Okay, so the difference here is that in September 8th, the share price increased from the opening price, whereas on September 9th, the share price dropped at the end of the day compared to the opening price. And we know this because on September 8th, the chart is green, or the graph is green, whereas on September 9th, it's red. Okay, so those are the key indicators. And the question here is, what was the approximate difference between the highest price and the lowest price for the week? Okay, so if you were to take a look, you'll see that the lowest price occurred right here, which is about 37.75. Okay, so we could say that that's 37.75. And the highest price occurred on September 7th, and that's right about 39.9. Okay, 39.90. So then the difference between those prices showed a fluctuation of about $2.15. Okay, so hopefully this made sense and you understand how to interpret both of these graphs. If any of this was confusing or if you need further clarification, please go back to the beginning of the recording and listen to it again. Thank you.